Hello, everybody. Welcome to Economics with the Honorable David M. Walker. I'm Nick Pellavita. I'll be your moderator for today's show. In today's show, we're going to, of course, discuss what happened recently in Venezuela with the removal of President Maduro. We have special guests from all over the world today. We'll bring in Ivan Kushenko from Kyiv, Ukraine, to discuss their viewpoint, Sasha Starr from Canada, and others. But first, none other than the Honorable David M. Walker, the former Comptroller General of the United States, to give us an update on this and other matters that are affecting the world and the world economy. So, none other than David Walker. I'm sure you've been following this breaking news, and I'm sure you have other news for us. So, we're going to turn the floor over to you.
Well, thanks, Nick. Happy New Year to everybody who's watching. Well, first, let me start with Maduro, and then we can go into other issues later. The fact is, this is deja vu all over again. In 1989, the United States extracted Noriega, who was then head of Panama, and others out of Panama based upon similar charges, namely that he was engaging in, illicit drug activities. In this particular case, Maduro had been under indictment since 2020 for a variety of different charges, including in engaging in drug trade. I myself predicted several weeks ago that this was going to happen, that there was going to be an extraction. The simple fact of the matter is that this was a flawless, targeted, precision operation designed just to extract Maduro as a law enforcement action. It was not an invasion. We have not declared war on Venezuela. We will not declare war on Venezuela. By the way, as a footnote, an important one, we haven't declared war since World War II, although there have been a number of actions that have taken place since then. He is now in New York. He is going to appear before a judge about noontime today. And so, as I say, it's deja vu all over again. Some people are arguing that it violates the UN Charter. Several comments on that. They made the same arguments with regard to Noriega in 1989. Secondly, the United States and many other countries, almost every major Western country, did not recognize Maduro as a legitimate head of state. Now, some of our adversaries did, China, Russia, Iran, Cuba, et cetera. Some of our adversaries did, but most of the Western world did not recognize him as a legitimate head of state. And we're also in a situation where, the UN can do what it wants, but the fact of the matter is the United States and 4 other countries have vetoes on any proposed action by the UN. The 5 permanent members of the Security Council of the United Nations can veto anything. In 1989, at least 3 countries vetoed the proposed action by the UN in connection with Noriega. And I'm sure that the United States and potentially others would veto any potential action. That's why the United Nations has really become very inept. I mean, in my view, it makes no sense whatsoever for any single country, including the United States, to be able to veto a proposed action by the United Nations. I mean, the UN needs a major reform. It needs to expand. The Security Council needs to expand the number of permanent members that need to require a majority vote of both the permanent members as well as the council as a whole, in order for an action to take place and give nobody a veto, including the United States. So we'll see what happens from here. I think this is just another example of Trump's, renewed Monroe Doctrine. Some call it a Donroe Doctrine. Where he's basically saying the United States has not paid enough attention to what's been going on in the Western Hemisphere. There have been a number of actions by China, Russia, and others to try to create inroads. The drug trade is cost hundreds of thousands of lives, in a given year. and so we'll see what happens from here. But I view this as a defendable, successful operation that reasonable people can differ on, but most importantly, I think a significant majority of the Venezuelan people, both the United States and in Venezuela and around the world, are glad that Maduro's gone. The real question is, what comes next? Oh, last thing. There's no way the United States is running Venezuela. That was a downright stupid comment to say that we're going to run Venezuela. We'll end up cooperating and trying to help them have a logical transition. We'll try to crack down if they try to use force against the people. But most major nations recognize that Maduro stole the last election, and he was not a legitimate leader of that country, and the people that follow him are part of the problem as well. So that's a little bit of intro. I look forward to hearing what other people have to say. And at some point, we ought to talk about what the economic statistics look like after the first year of Trump being in office.
Okay, we're going to bring in Ivan Kashenko from Kiev. We have a very special guest, and of course, we know there's a conflict going on there, and he can give us an update on what's going on in Kiev, Ukraine. So, Ivan, the floor is yours. I know that you probably saw what happened in Ukraine, and maybe it'll happen in Russia. We don't know yet, but that would be very interesting. So, what are your thoughts, and what are the thoughts of people in Ukraine?
Yeah, hello to everyone, and Happy New Year. People here are pretty inspired by that brilliant operation of the United States because Venezuela actually is an ally of Russia, and Maduro was particularly an ally of Russia. So when allies of Russia are weakened, then probably it leads to weakening of Russia and more positive situation of Ukraine in this war. So in general, that news came with a great inspiration from Ukrainians.
Do you want me to bring that up then, Ivan? The clip?
Yeah. And what is important that situation showed that Russia is not able to protect their allies. They've announced that they've supplied anti-air defense systems to Venezuela, and we've seen from the videos that those systems didn't help Venezuela at all. That American helicopters were flying pretty free in the Venezuela airspace, and as Russia was not able to support their ally Bashar Assad in Syria, as they were not able to support their ally Armenia when there was a conflict with Azerbaijan. They were not able to support Venezuela as well. So it shows that Russia is not so powerful ally even for the countries which form now an axis of evil. And actually, they were not able to support Iran during the 12 days war when Israel attacked and the United States as well attacked Iranian infrastructure. But what is funny in this situation that Russian propaganda started to blame United States that they're copying, cosplaying the Russian tactics, actually, that United States did what Russia did in the beginning of the full-scale invasion almost 4 years ago, that Russia had airborne troops in Ukraine, and they had the same situation. It is really funny to read those propaganda claims because that Russian operation was completely failed. Their airborne troops in Hostomel almost 4 years ago were destroyed. They were not able to complete their military objects despite the American Special Forces. And I've got a video clip, a short video clip to watch. It's pretty old. It's like several years old, but and it was created year after the full-scale invasion, but it still shows the real situation about that failed Russian military operation, and you can just compare it with the American operation in Venezuela. So we can watch it right now.
For decades, the world hasn't seen an assault on a major European city. Yet last year, Russians decided to capture the 3 million megapolis of Kyiv. Putin has thrown his elite troops to take the Ukrainian capital. So how did it happen that for most of them, Kyiv region became a grave? Hostomel is situated just 10 kilometers away from Kyiv's borders. This small airfield was normally used for cargo flights. A flight to Malaysia took off from Hostomel only hours before the invasion. However, the airfield has become a vital objective of Putin's blitzkrieg. A few hours into the invasion, it was attacked by a few dozen Russian helicopters flying low above peaceful cottages. Ka-52 advanced from the skies, while the cargo Mi-8 deployed hundreds of elite paratroopers on the airfield. Their task was to capture the runway to let large cargo planes land. A few dozen Il-76, stacked with soldiers, were circling above Belarus, awaiting for command. One such vessel can carry up to 150 soldiers or a few armored vehicles. If such forces were to appear near Kyiv, holding the capital would be extremely challenging. The plan seemed impeccable. The airfield defense was carried out by an understaffed National Guard brigade, armed only with mortars and small arms. Military psychologists, accountants, firefighters, and press officers resisted the first blow along with the regular conscripts. All in all, no more than 200 people. Despite helicopter fire, they fought off the elite Russian paratroopers from the 45th Guard Spetsnaz Brigade. They even managed to put down a few helicopters.
Amazing thing about this battle was that we managed to shoot down 2 helicopters using concentrated fire from smaller arms, from our Kalashnikovs, basically.
Fight over the airfield continued. The Il-76 never received a command to deploy troops. Shortly after, the conventional armed force of Ukraine approached the airfield. Some fierce fights took place around Hostomel. Ukrainian artillery hit the enemy and damaged the runway, making it impossible to land. Nevertheless, Russians kept sending more people and equipment there.
Вийшов на мене командуючий Майк, сказав: «Зевс, ти наші єдині глаза, потрібно, щоб ти залишився в Гостомелі». Підійшов якомога ближче до аеродрома, виявляв цілі, і коректував артилерію. Тому я і ще 3 чоловіка на другий день на світанок почали висуватися ближче до аеродрома. Ми розбили зльотку аеродрома і сам аеродром на квадрати, де, якщо очікувалося противника, я говорю просто координати, і туди починає працювати артилерія. Як тільки виявили ворожі гелікоптери, приблизно дізналися, де вони сіли, передали квадрат і туди почали працювати артилерія. Бачили, як піднявся дим, вогонь, але що саме підбили, сказати точно не можу, не дозволяла місцевість.
During the next few weeks, Ukrainians were precisely hitting various equipment on the runway. Russians never succeeded in capturing the airfield and deploying their troops there. At the end of March, they suffered catastrophic losses and retreated from Hostomel. The Telegraph called this Russia's humiliating retreat. At the beginning of April, the entire Kyiv region and the north of Ukraine were liberated. Russia's blitzkrieg had failed. The most trained troops of the Russian army died in Hostomel, and it was not their only defeat. World media concluded, in the end, Putin lost half of his elite, the paratroopers.
You know that Hostomel was a symbolic place that the Russian aggression was started here. They're trying to deploy here the parachute troopers here and starting the occupation of the capital of our country. And our army kicked them out. That's it.
If I can, Nick, can I jump in here?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Well, first, Ivan, thank you very much for your comments and for showing that video. I think it's very illuminating, even though it is somewhat dated. let me compare and contrast, some of these recent actions. One, there's absolutely no question that Russia invaded Ukraine. Okay, and this wasn't the first time that Russia has invaded Ukraine. It took Crimea in 2014, and nothing was done. Literally, nothing was done, despite the Budapest Agreement of the 1990s. It invaded Ukraine again on a much broader basis in 2022. The UN, it was a clear violation of the UN Charter, no ifs, ands, or buts. And the UN tried to pass a resolution condemning Russia and took some minor actions against Russia with regard to their representation on certain councils. But since Russia is one of 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council, they vetoed any potential other action by the United Nations. You compare and contrast that to Panama, where we used 27,000 troops, because you have to keep in mind we had troops in Panama because of the Panama Canal, in order to extract Noriega. It was a limited operation, but it involved significant number of U.S. troops, and it involved people other than just Noriega. And then compare that to what happened on Friday, where it was a limited special forces operation, no invasion whatsoever, no U.S. troops remaining on the ground, extracting Maduro, to hold him accountable and give him his day in court. Totally different situation. But I will say this, hopefully the Russia-Ukraine situation will end before too long, but there are lots of lessons to be learned. One of which is, agreements aren't acceptable. You need to have binding treaties. Binding treaties are necessary in order to be able to stand the test of time. The Budapest Agreement is a perfect example of just because you get an agreement with one particular administration that has not been ratified by the Congress and therefore making it a treaty is not acceptable. Okay. In addition, the UN needs fundamental reform because it's basically ineffective, totally ineffective with regard to clear violations of the UN Charter. In order to have something that is meaningful, it's got to be enforceable. And if it's not enforceable, it's meaningless.
Mm-hmm. And with that, we're going to bring in our panel from around the world. We're going to bring in Sasha Starr, who also used to live in Odessa. And so he's had some issues with the invasion of his home country, and he lives in Canada now. We're going to bring in Dr. Sharif from Bangladesh, who gives us the Asian viewpoint on what's going on with this crisis, I guess, in Venezuela, and Jatovi, who comes in from the United States of America. So I guess we'll start with Sasha because we wanted to bring up the Ukraine. I thought maybe there was a chance the U.S. military. What Ivan was showing is the U.S. military did a great job, and the Russian military sucked when it came to doing an operation. So I thought Putin needs to look at his backside because the next time, who knows, he may be facing jail time in a district in New York somewhere. Yeah, Sasha, what's up?
I'd like to mention that I think it would be useful to take apart the U.S. operation in one department is capturing the criminal Maduro and his wife for narco traffic violations and many other crimes, bring them for justice to the United States, have him his day in court. That's one, and it's totally justified. Now, the other thing, it seems to me it's not the end of U.S. operations in Venezuela. There is something more to it, which people, for various reasons, hate to stipulate and really spell it out, whether it's an attempt to control and run Venezuela, whether it's a Venezuelan oil that will be used for US oil companies, which would, by the way, have to invest billions of dollars before they will become profitable and really produce results. Now, in either case, there is a use of enormous US power, military, economical, spending a lot of money to implement it all, which does not benefit Venezuelan people and even to less so American people, because it's American shareholders of oil companies. They may benefit once the investment was provided and everything worked out. So I don't really see how that could be justified, set apart from capturing Maduro and his wife.
Well, let me jump in for a second, okay? As many on this broadcast probably know, Venezuela has the largest proven oil reserves of any country, and yet they've been totally inept and incompetent, and I could use other words, in being able to exploit that. Grossly mismanaged, deteriorating infrastructure, et cetera, et cetera. There's absolutely no question that there's going to be a desire to try to be able to tap some of those oil reserves in order to, pull oil prices down. Obviously, Venezuela will benefit to a certain degree on that. It's their oil. I don't know what kind of agreement might end up being worked out between the U.S. companies and the Venezuelan government with regard to that. And that's to be determined. But Sasha is right to say that, while the primary reason for this was to extract Noriega for the reasons that we've talked about, that there are other issues that people are concerned with in addition to that. And clearly, the oil reserves and energy production is one of them. There's no question about that.
See, Dave, my point is that beside capturing Maduro and his wife and bringing them to US, which is totally justified, it's perfectly done, and nobody has any questions about that. All the rest of it, but it's been done already 2 days ago. It's done and over with. There is no more point to discuss and even to mention that because it's already accomplished. Now, the other issues are completely murky at the best. It's unclear, even without congressional and Senate approval, meddling in the Venezuela, besides capturing Maduro, which we already discussed and it's done and over with. Why would you use enormous US machinery to benefit a few oil companies? That remains to be unclear. So essentially, US oil companies have to pay US mercenaries to act on their behalf. It's a mercenary action on behalf of US oil companies, and they have to pay for it. And I have no problems with that.
Well, the answer is let's wait and see, Sasha.
Yeah,
I will say this. I think the operation was highly successful and justified. However, some of President Trump's comments, in my view, were clearly inappropriate and went too far. Where he said, for example, that we're going to run Venezuela, okay? And one of the issues that one of the inference of that is we're going to take over the energy production. We're not going to take over the energy production. I think basically what the situation is U.S. oil companies have the expertise to be able to improve the ability of Venezuela to produce more oil. And as far as how that'll be done and who will benefit for that, that's to be determined. But you're right. That is a legitimate issue to monitor and see how it comes out and who benefits from it.
Dave, something else. I'd like to remind about Monroe Doctrine, which Trump looks like he is trying to implement that. I've looked recently at the Monroe Doctrine, and it deals with European powers not to get involved in Latin America and others. In that case, even Canada does not fall into Monroe Doctrine, although while it's in North America, but no European countries meddling in Canada. It's actually another way around. Canada is now meddling a lot into European affairs, and even it will participate in a $1 trillion military spending, and Canada already has first contracts available to it. But what I'd like to say is that in this case, Monroe Doctrine is nullified. It's not neither here or there. Although now Trump is talking about Mexico and probably Cuba and probably even Brazil and many other countries that would be as a part of following Monroe Doctrine. And this cannot be any farther from the truth, because I'm not aware that European powers are trying to affect Brazil or Mexico or Cuba or any other country. So what's your view on that?
Well, let me just remind you that Russia is a European country.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You're right.
All right.
I thought it's Asian country now.
It's both. It's the biggest country on earth, but it is not a superpower.
Yeah.
As we have seen, Ukraine has done a fantastic job, and Russia has declined dramatically. The only reason that Russia has any significant fear factor associated with it is because its possession of nuclear weapons. And my real concern is I don't think we're ever going to have a strategic nuclear exchange, but I get concerned about the use of tactical nuclear weapons. And that's what I watch very closely. How about others? Others have any comments on what happened?
Dr. Sharif and then Jatovi.
Okay.
My questions, already the last episode I discussed that politically this is very successful initiative by Trump. This is the fact, this is the reality, and it creates pressure, the China ally and this Russian ally, especially the political pressure. And this is, I want to say, one of the successfully operation USA done. But my questions to Honorable David M. Walker: what are the economic consequences of the US actions, and that could be interpreted as a holding the president of Venezuela hostage? What's your thought about this economical impact? Because this is economic shows. I love to learn from you.
Well, look, I mean, Maduro is going to have his day in court. The case with regard to Noriega took 2 years to be able to bring it before the case was brought. In this particular case, most legal experts believe that the case against Maduro is stronger than Noriega, and that it will happen a lot more quickly than was the case with Noriega. As you may recall, with Noriega, he was convicted, spent time in U.S. prison, then he was extradited back to Panama, where he was subject to additional proceedings, and spent additional time in prison, and ultimately died in prison in 2017. We can see something similar happen here with regard to Maduro. I think the biggest, the biggest concern is what's the transition going to look like in a way that will provide stability, opportunity, for the Venezuelan people, that also will result in, better utilization of the significant natural resources that they have. Not just oil, but oil is what everybody's talking about, but they have a lot of rare earth minerals and other things as well. What can be done that can benefit the Venezuelan people, but also can end up having, a more positive impact beyond Venezuela with regard to, access to critical resources like oil and rare earth materials and things of that nature. And obviously economics is about supply and demand. And depending upon how successful that is, that could end up having, a positive economic impact that could not only benefit the people of Venezuela, but also, global prices, also, security considerations. Because right now, for example, the United States is unduly dependent on China for rare earth materials. And I haven't done the research to find out how much Venezuela has in that regard. That's also one of the reasons that the United States is interested in trying to work out an arrangement with Greenland, because Greenland has a lot of rare earth materials. Working out an arrangement doesn't mean invading them and taking them over, by the way.
Jatovi from the USA.
Well, the sad part is that's exactly what we did, though. As we're talking about it, Trump never after and the whole mission accomplished thing. I can't do. We can rant and rave about it being successful and this and that, but that gives echoes of mission accomplished. And we know what happened after that whole banner and everything else happened after that. And we're not even mentioning about the Venezuelan people who died during that mission as well, or during this successful mission. So when we talk about a successful mission, we have to really think about what we're really saying with that. But we are now in a position where we are now taking over Venezuela for the oil, because as stated by Trump in his own speech after the whole mission took place, he never once talked about democracy, never once talked about the freeing of the people of Venezuela or liberating. No, he talked about the American oil companies and the oil, and we're going to sell it and so on and so forth. So as you stated, which I'm glad you stated, that what he said was the things that he said during that was poor. But we always, and this is what gets me about every time we talk about Trump, is we give him some benefit of the doubt on what he says. And then we say that he's joking or that he doesn't know what to say. But then once he goes and does these things, we're shocked, or we're like, okay, well, he did what he said. Well, he's telling you right now that we're going to pillage the place for rare earth minerals and oil. We're going to split up Venezuela, because how much of a kickback did, for example, how much of a kickback did ExxonMobil, Chevron, BP, and Shell give to the American people after the Iraq war? They set up shop there the same way they're going to do down in Venezuela. We didn't get a kickback. We didn't get anything. But yet we're expecting somehow to get some kickback now. We're going to get some discount now, when that has never happened in our history. And we have to look at our history as precedent, because we're doing the same recycle thing. So from my standpoint, nobody is defending Maduro. Nobody sheds a tear for Maduro. And we've said that. We can all agree on that. The problem is the tactics and how things have gone about it, or the ways that it's gone about.
All right, let me jump in. Okay. First, I think this operation with regard to Venezuela and Iraq are totally apples and oranges. Our son fought in Iraq as a Marine Corps officer. We invaded Iraq on false pretenses for the specific purpose of taking out the government. Okay. There are people in the administration at that time that claimed that we didn't that it wasn't going to cost us anything, that we were going to end up making a lot of money because of the oil reserves that existed in Iraq. That was a false claim. That did not happen. You're right. The government doesn't directly benefit from what the oil companies get. But on the other hand, to the extent that economics is about supply and demand, and you have more supply, that serves to hold down energy prices, which does benefit consumers, not just the United States, but around the world. So yeah, I have publicly said, and my son who fought in Iraq agrees with me, that what we did in Iraq was a mistake the second time, and it created a vacuum in the Middle East by eliminating a check and balance to Iran, which fortunately their ambitions have been clipped somewhat in the last year by the operation that took place to take out their nuclear capabilities. But I don't think you can compare what happened in Venezuela to what we did in Iraq. I think it's just total apples and oranges. Yeah,
I actually can, because you actually stated it. You legitimately said, and I do thank your son for his service. That's an amazing thing. and and everything like that. But what you said, we went to Iraq under false pretense.
Yeah.
Why did we go to Venezuela? We supposedly went to Venezuela because they had fentanyl. Then it became some type of drugs. Then now we're being told that it's oil. So it is a false pretense that we went to war over. They even did the whole yellow cake situation, talking about its weapons of mass destruction, that all these drugs are weapons. So we went up under false pretense to go there. Saddam Hussein was a bad dude. So is Nicolas Maduro. We get that. There are so many. When you're talking about the destabilization of Iraq and keeping that check on Iran, well, we talk about how Maduro is running all the cartels in Venezuela and everything else and all these checks on there. So there are connections. There are relevant similarities. I'm not saying it's the same thing.
Yeah. Well, let me clarify.
There are a lot of similarities.
Let me clarify. We invaded Iraq for purposes of taking out the government. That was the purpose, okay? And in my case, that should not have been done, and it should have required a declaration of war. And this is another example of the Congress not doing their job. The Congress should have declared war in that circumstance. I don't know that they would have declared war. At the same point in time, this particular situation, okay, the primary reason we went in, and I'm not saying there aren't other reasons, and we'll have to see how they play out, but the primary reason was to take Maduro out, not to take over the country, not to invade the country, not to occupy the country, which we did all of that in Iraq, okay? And so I think there are substantive differences, and we'll just have to wait to see how things play out on the transition and with regard to access to energy reserves and other critical reserves. I to be determined. I don't know.
We'll probably agree to disagree on this point. But again, you're talking about toppling the government in Iraq. Yet we went in for oil. We know it was blood for oil there. We went and took out Maduro. Maduro's the government in Venezuela, and we went in and took out Maduro, and now we know that it was blood for oil here. We invaded for both, going to topple there. They've already said that we're going to take over and send troops on the ground. So we're going to legitimately be in Venezuela. And we weren't told at the beginning of Iraq that we were going to be in Iraq, but we were. We weren't told.
Whoa. The reason that we were told we went into Iraq,
yellow cake,
weapons of mass destruction, okay? That's what we were told. My personal view, okay, is there was also a desire to get back at Saddam because he tried to assassinate Bush 41. There was a specific plot to try to assassinate Bush 41, okay? And so, but look, again, just look at the numbers. Okay? I mean, we sent in huge numbers of troops. We occupied the country. We were there for years. Okay.
At the beginning,
in case we had a one-night operation. We don't have troops on the ground. And in fact, the president has said, we'll see what happens. But he says, we're not going to have troops on the ground.
We were told all this at the beginning of the Iraq War.
But there aren't any troops on the ground. Okay.
No,
If it turns out that there are later on, then fine, we can have a discussion about it. But as of today, they're not.
But what I'm saying is history is repeating itself, and we are playing like history is not. We were told at the beginning of the Iraq War the same things, the yellow cake and the weapons of mass destruction. That's what they just said about the drugs coming to the U.S., which we never even knew they were coming to the U.S. because there was proven that Venezuela was sending drugs to Europe and not the U.S. And then on top of that, the drug boats, we don't know if they had drugs on them because they never gave any proof that they were drugs. But we were told there were weapons of mass destruction. They're killing all these individuals. It's the same. I'll see if I can find the clip, but it's the same wording. People have actually edited clips and shown that they've used the same words that we used for the lead up to Iraq as they used for the lead up to this. So all I'm saying is, and I completely agree, we need to wait. But the problem is, we know what the history is, what our history is, and how things have gone about.
We do know the history.
Past is not necessarily prologue, but I agree you need to learn from history and learn from others. We'll see how it plays out. Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, I was just going to say one thing that history did show is that basically Venezuela was the richest country in Latin America until the socialist Hugo Chavez stepped in and Maduro stepped in, and now 82% of their population live in poverty. So it's not hard to see we have a serious problem here. And part of the reason they were the richest country in Latin America, and this is what history shows, is their oil industry, which right now is demolished. So David, they turn the oil industry around, you'll turn Venezuela around. That's just the way it's going to happen. So I think Sasha had his hand up, so we'll move over to
I would
Sasha.
like to ask you, when you're talking about the Venezuela not efficient economically because of their shortages of the oil productions and so on, this is a business of Venezuela. It is not a business of the United States.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, okay? I agree. Let's if we can, let's pivot for a second. We just finished 2025. This show is supposed to be about economics, although it's good to talk about other issues as well, some of which can have economic implications, others which are more political in nature. But let's talk a little bit about how the year went. How the year went under the first year of Trump, his second term, as compared to how things went under the last administration. GDP growth is up. It was 4.3% for the third quarter. We'll see what happens in the fourth quarter. That won't be announced until next month. We do have to keep in mind that there was a 43-day U.S. government shutdown during the fourth quarter. That will have some adverse impact, but clearly we'll have positive economic growth. We just don't know what the number will be. Inflation is down somewhat. Through November, inflation was 2.7%. It averaged 5% a year during the last administration. And it was 3% when Trump took office. Real wages, are up about 0.8%. They were down 1.3% during the last administration. Unemployment is up, which is not good. 4.6% in November as compared to 4% when Trump took office and 4.1% average during the Biden administration. Labor force participation is basically flat at 62.4%. The monthly trade deficit is down dramatically from the last administration, in large part because of the effect of tariffs. The Fed discount rate is down 3.75% in December as compared to 5.5% at the beginning of the administration. Total debt to GDP is up, despite the fact that the economy is growing. The deficit is bigger than the economic growth. The Dow, the Dow is up. The stock market is up. But we still have some items that we don't know how they're going to play out. The tariffs are before the Supreme Court. In my view, you put them into three categories. Tariffs that were negotiated on a bilateral or multilateral basis. I think obviously those should stay. Changes in tariffs that have to do with national security and public health reasons. I think the Supreme Court may give Trump some discretion in connection with those matters. But then tariffs that were unilaterally imposed allegedly for reciprocity reasons without national security or public health implications. I think those are highly questionable and could be struck down by the Supreme Court. We'll see. I think it's highly unlikely the Supreme Court would require those amounts to be refunded, but they could prohibit them on a going forward basis. Then you would have to see what Trump would try to do to be able to impose the tariffs based upon other aspects of law, and whether or not that would be successful or not. So that's just a few facts with regard to where we've been, where we are, and the big issue that has to get resolved from an economic standpoint, and that is the tariffs. I will say this: Trump is going to appoint a new Fed chair. Trump wants there to be dramatic reductions in the Fed discount rate. I've got concerns about that. The number one charge of the Federal Reserve is to deal with inflation, and they're in the best position to deal with that. Inflation is still above their target. Economic growth is good. Unemployment is a little bit of a concern, but still within a reasonable range, and yet inflation is still above what the target is. So I think one has to be cautious about trying to see significant reductions in the Fed discount rate, given the current economic circumstances. But we'll see. Thoughts from others? Sasha?
Knows that this is 4.3 GDP growth rate. It's highly artificial, and not only because of the shutdown of U.S. government, it's because most of it is based on artificial intelligence spending of a few companies. If you take this out and talk about real economy, there is hardly any growth at all. Forget about 4.3%. There is a very unlikely growth left. If you take a performance of stock market, S&P 500, if you take Magnificent Seven out, they are in red. 493 stocks of S&P 500, they are in red to different degrees, but the top 7, they are providing all the growth and all the profits of S&P. Now, today market is very vulnerable despite of all that, or maybe in spite of all that, depends how you look. Every day, the prices, overnight futures are getting higher, and retail investors are plowing their money into the stocks from 401k and other sources, and professionals are unloading billions of dollars worth of stocks into these amateur investors. And that's happening now almost every single day. If you look at the volume, the biggest volume is from about 9:45, maybe 10 o'clock in the morning until 12:30. Then the institution's done their selling, and then the market is going somewhat higher or stays the same or so on. The volume is much lower than in the morning and so on, but it's happening almost every single day. And I'm afraid that institutions are preparing to unload substantial number of their holdings and bringing Dow or other S&P probably down 20%, and it may happen in the next month or so.
Well, first,
I agree with Sasha. Go on.
Well, first, I would agree, Sasha, that a lot of the economic growth is associated with AI and data centers. I've seen different numbers on that. Some people have said if you take that out, there's no growth. I don't agree with that. But I do think it has a significant impact. No question about that. All right. I have not looked at the numbers. You're right. The Magnificent Seven clearly are a big part of the reason that the market's up. I haven't looked at absent that, so I can't really comment on that. I will tell you this: diversification is key, right? And it's not just diversification with regard to stocks. It's diversification with regard to other asset classes. And one of the things that I did early in 2024 is I significantly increased my asset allocation to alternatives, including gold and silver.
The thing the report that we just got concurs with what Sasha says. It comes from a model that I think Dr. Sharif would like, called Shiller-Bowles. Shiller-Bowles won basically a Nobel Prize for determining valuations of the stock market, And they say today the market is overpriced. It hasn't been this overpriced since the recession in 2008 and the depression in 1929. So I encourage people to go Google Schiller Bulls and look at the valuation of the market, because right now we've had 3 big run-up years. We call them run-up years, double-digit returns, placing the market in an overpriced situation. Now, what happens next? Who knows? But there's a good possibility that the U.S. falls into recession in 2026, not because anything's bad happening, but frankly, David, it's overpriced.
But that also could be a huge melt up before meltdown. So because there are so many people are now very cautious, some of them are having large short positions, some of them are exiting market for a while. So the market can skyrocket now to astronomical highs, and the people who are on the short end, they will be wiped out first, and then only then the market will collapse.
That's the problem with investing. I mean, the real problem, no one has a crystal ball, and there's so many different factors. But if you do look at Schiller Bulls, you'll see that the market, as we sit today, is overpriced. And the bad points is this called for a recession in 2008 and also in 2026. But we also do know that the Fed can do a lot to slow down the recession using their monetary policy and the fiscal policy of the government. What they did last time is they infused cash into the system. So even though right now, if everything sits, you'll probably have a recession in 2026. But let's say the Trump dividend comes out, then what happens? He plans on giving everybody $1,700. Well, then the stock market won't be in a recession.
Fed can control only short end of interest rates, starting from 10 years, 20 and 30, that controls by international market. And if US has approaching now $39 trillion, so obviously the international lenders will demand higher interest rates. So if now Fed will bring the short-term low and the international rates will go much higher, Dave, you know what's happened in this case.
Yeah.
It's a dislocation.
Yeah.
Huge.
Well, I think we had just talked about one other piece though, but I think with those the Magnificent Seven, I think is what you called them, Sasha.
Yeah, either way.
They're all, as we talked about, heavily invested in a dot-com bubble. And that's going to burst.
Netflix is a little bit separate entity from all that. And in some documentation, Netflix is not part of Magnificent Seven, okay? Because they don't depend so much on the chips and the call centers and all these wonderful things. But obviously, NVIDIA is number one, obviously, and the biggest company in the world for that matter. And then you have Microsoft, and then you have all the usual suspects. And these are Magnificent Seven. The Meta, for example, even Oracle now is becoming one of the biggest companies here and there. So you have to be very, very careful how you play. I was joking that when you buy S&P 500, you're buying 7 Magnificent Seven stocks and 493 garbage stocks. So why would you need 493 garbage stocks when you can concentrate on 7 real value stocks? But now you have to be very, very careful.
But the crazy part with the AI bubble, when that bursts, that's going to hit your chips market, which hits hits Bitcoin.
Yep.
And that whole digital infrastructure there will crash as soon as that AI bubble crashes. And with everybody, a lot of other companies investing not only heavily in AI now, but also heavily, some are trying to convert over to this. And that's something, Dave, I think would be fun to, have a discussion around. Is that whole Bitcoin digital currency market that's decentralized. And if you forget your number, you lost every little bit of your money. So that whole digital currency situation is another burst. I think that would be fun to talk about in terms of economics.
Yeah, and there's another issue too, and that is we talk about all these data centers and the chips and things of that nature and AI. Um, they require a huge amount of energy. And one of the challenges that we really have is how are we going to be able to deal with that? Because,
Hey, I know.
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I know we're winding down and
I know
everything.
an
I know
oil field in
all
Venezuela.
along those lines and everything like that. But I did have a quick question for you that came up in the conversation. It is an economic question, Dave, which I know you'll love and everything along those lines. My mom recently was had a fender bender and all along those lines, so she's now out car shopping. And one thing she's finding is that a lot of the old cars back in the day don't exist anymore because of the American brand and everything. Like she wants a compact, and Lincoln doesn't make that brand anymore, and a lot of the other cars don't make it, and everything like that. So I'm just wondering, are we going to this era where everybody is building these big super vehicles, and if you want a more traditional Lincoln kind of car and everything, and Lincolns weren't exactly small cars and everything, but they are not being made those old style brands and everything along those lines. So I just wanted your take on it from an economic standpoint as to whether we've gone bigger is better.
The U.S. automobile industry, it's my understanding, makes by far the most money on SUVs and trucks.
Mm-hmm.
All right, SUVs and trucks. And to the extent that you want to buy, a smaller vehicle, in many cases, you're probably going to end up buying, Japanese or another, or Hyundai or Kia or another brand that's maybe made in the United States. Just because they're foreign owned doesn't mean that they're not made in the United States, but you're probably not going to get a U.S. brand, although there are some options that are available.
Yeah, I just found it interesting because, like I said, when I was talking to her earlier today, and that's part of what I was doing while y'all were doing the show, while also monitoring it, she was definitely
as Mark broke up real quick.
We lost you, Mark.
Yeah,
no problem.
I was just going to point out a touch on two things. In terms of the data centers, what you were talking about, Dave, that's another barrier, and whoever controls that power barrier is going to be a controller, but also the heat barrier, and that's a huge thing. But Finland evidently has come up with a model of doing the data center underground, where that's going to use the data center heat to maintain a temperature level in different cities in Finland. And that was an idea or a model idea that people had thought about. And in terms of cars, which, Dave, I know you love cars and I love cars too. You've got to look into the Huawei cars. I tried to show, I think it was Mark a little bit about it and Rick a little bit about the Huawei cars. Right now, BYD is taking over the electric market from Tesla. And they're going to continue to push. And I know the U.S. market is, if it hits the U.S. market, the BYD and the Chinese brands that are all out there that are all being pushed out will take over a lot of that electric market, especially in the U.S. because of the price point that they go at. For example, the Huawei, even though we pushed out Huawei, the chips and the cell phones, they do make a car now. And their cars, the technology in those cars is unreal. And it's really cool. And you can get some of these Huawei cars that have technology that you can look at that are hundreds of thousands of dollars for like a $60,000 car or a $50,000 car.
Well, Huawei obviously is, they're not allowed to import their cars right now. We'll have to see how that happens, and to be determined. All right, Nick, I think we're at the hour, my friend.
We're out of time, and we thank the Honorable David M. Walker. By the way, AI needs more energy. We found it. It's called Venezuela. So stay tuned for what's going to happen next. We'll see you next time on Economics, the Honorable David M. Walker.
Take care.
Hi. Hey, Nick.
You didn't end the show yet. You were still going.
I'll end it.
Okay, please.